Listening to Hysteria, the podcast for people who know to never do two things. Release an album the same week that Taylor Swift does, or fuck with Nancy Pelosi.
It's true.
Alyssa is taking a much-deserved summer vacation this week, and Josie, writer, podcast host, and a generally cool and wonderful and smart person, is filling in. So welcome, Josie.
Thank you, and thank you for saying what I told you to say about me. Repeated exactly how I wanted.
Okay, the Democratic National Convention was last week, and the numbers are looking pretty good for Vice President Kamala Harris. The Democratic nominee has raised $540 million in just over a month since the beginning of her run for president, which is a record. And last week alone, she raised $82 million, and the polls are looking good. The race is very close, but Harris's numbers are improving in swing states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Josie, how are you feeling about all this?
Well, look, I feel a lot better than I did a month ago, as I think we all do, right? Nowhere to go but up. And I feel I like her chances. I still feel like this race is pretty close, terrifyingly close, given what we're working with, which is someone who doesn't even seem to be on the same planet as the rest of us. So it feels kind of crazy to me. It makes me, I'm wary always because it's still pretty close, right? Like things are looking a lot better, but we certainly do not have this in the bag.
Yeah, the fact that it's close is a little bit like mind-boggling to me. And then I've seen some media coverage of Harris, some critical like op-eds that are like, joy is not a strategy, or like, she's thin on substance. It's like, well, she's not Donald Trump. Like that is like, well, and I don't think she's that thin on substance. She's been in the Biden administration for the last 4 years, but it makes me feel crazy. I feel like they're acting as though she's running against someone normal.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's kind of crazy because we're on our third run of Donald Trump being a really hard, like, candidate to beat. You know, it is nuts the way that we are still kind of talking about him. Like, we're dealing with a person and also, like, a cultural sensation that reflects anything we've ever seen before. Because we're not.
For sure.
Like, it's a totally different thing.
It's a totally different thing. And another thing that the media is kind of complaining about is that Harris is just about to sit down for her first big interview, but they were upset that she wasn't giving them enough access. Do you think that her focusing more on public outreach was the right move early on in her campaign?
I think that focusing more on public outreach, public outreach is maybe more important. I think a thing that doesn't, I think I cannot actually justify in my head is necessarily putting those two things in opposition, which I think is something the campaign is doing. I get why. I get why you wouldn't want to talk to the press. I think it's important to set the expectation, right, that candidates do both. And right now, I think, I mean, especially in the past couple election cycles, that expectation has kind of fallen apart, right? So I think if you have to prioritize those two, she's prioritizing the right one. But really, both of them should be doable for someone who's going to, you know, maybe run the country.
Yeah. Do you think that she is, she's been controlling the narrative since she became the candidate. And I remember when she first became the candidate and people were so excited about her, there was a Republican strategist that dismissed it as like a quote unquote sugar high. Well, here we are, and she's still in another round of good headlines. How long do you think this is a sugar high, or is this something more sustainable?
I think it's, anytime that we get a new candidate, anytime you're just a few months before the election, when people are really starting to feel the pressure, like the mood is going to hit some artificial highs and lows. But I think in general, like, she's proving herself to be a very endearing and welcome and intelligent candidate who is capable of, you know, holding public, public opinion, of holding public adoration, really. Do I think it's going to be like this forever? No, because eventually you do make policy decisions. You do say things people don't like. You do have to come down one way or the other, right? And it's easier earlier on. But I think sugar high is silly, because what we're clearly saying is that this is what people want. they wanted something else, and it is very exciting to feel like you're finally getting that.
Mm-hmm. What about an October surprise? Do you think there's one coming? What are your predictions?
Oh my God. I just keep hoping that Tim Walz, that sweet, sweet angel, doesn't have some weird something in his history. I don't know. You're Minnesota. I don't know what's going on in Minnesota, but I'm hoping that there's no like major thing coming down the line. But I mean, this kind of goes back to our earlier point, right? Like 2 months is very little time and also a lot of time for public opinion to change. And we've seen what has shifted in just the past 2 months of this race, right? We know that like I would say that it feels like Democrats have the narrative advantage right now, but it's a really close election and things shift on a dime, right? And so I think the question is like, can you garner enough public trust for people to feel like, okay, even if something happens that I don't like, even if, regardless, do I trust this person? Do I trust the country in the hands of this person for the next 4 years, especially given my options, right? Because you only have two.
Right.
Robert F. Kennedy is not going to be president. We have now confirmed. Okay.
He suspended his campaign. He's like ordering a Kennedy off Temu. He's like, it's like I need a Kennedy, but I only want to spend $2 on it. And
he's like you took a Kennedy and beheaded him and then put him on your trunk, like on the head of your car, and then drove him around. That is what he's like. He's like a zombie beheaded other Kennedy.
Yeah, I feel like the curse is broken, but not in the way the Kennedy family may have wanted it to break.
Yeah, exactly. I will never step foot on that compound. I do not know what it does to people's brains.
No. I mean, I hope the brainworm does get to enjoy nice retirement after all of this is done. Maybe sit in a little brainworm-sized rocking chair on a brainworm-sized front porch in a brainworm-sized Kennedy compound that is right next to the regular-sized Kennedy compound. My imagination is active today. Okay, so
it's great. I love it.
Meanwhile, I don't know if you saw this, Josie, but Donald Trump is in a fight with a cemetery. Donald Trump visited Arlington National Cemetery. Campaigning is strictly prohibited on Arlington National Cemetery, and the people who volunteer and work there are very, very serious about it. Donald Trump's team allegedly brought an unauthorized photographer. Somebody from Arlington was like, you have to stop. You can't do campaign stuff here. And somebody from the Donald Trump team, according to an NPR report I listened to on this, shoved the Arlington person. So
look, you shouldn't shove the cemetery worker at all. The optics of shoving the like woman who works at Arlington National Cemetery are so crazy.
Yeah.
They're so bizarre.
I don't know. He could, who do you think is going to win though? Cemetery or Trump?
It's again, the entire party, the like death theme between the bear and the whale and the worm and the cemetery. It's like a little heavy-handed. If this was a novel, we'd be like, take down the symbolism just a little bit.
Too much symbolism. Donald Trump. I mean, aren't we all in a fight with a cemetery in a way?
In a way, aren't we all? Yeah. So in that way, the cemetery's going to win.
Yeah.
He will die one day.
Everybody's going to. Eventually, the cemetery comes for all of us. Yeah. But not me.
It's true.
I want to be thrown in a bog. Okay. And then JD Vance also had some unearthed audio come out earlier this week where he said that he doesn't trust people without kids working in education, which is a very ironic thing for a Catholic to say.
I guess if anybody has the right to say that.
But priests and nuns, but like,
right.
Do his kids go to Catholic school? It doesn't matter.
Right.
But if they do, isn't he entrusting their education to a lot of people without kids? I think that's so strange.
His obsession with people without kids is so bizarre for anybody who ever wanted to be a politician. Like it's so strange to me. I'm like, what like, get a hobby. Why are you thinking about this all the time?
Well, he's so obsessed with people that have kids. He's obsessed with teachers having kids. But for me, it's like, okay, JD, if people with kids need to be teachers, why don't you quit your big fucking job and be a teacher? If it's so important that teachers have kids, why doesn't your wife quit her big fucking job and be a teacher? Well, she did quit her big fucking job, but not to be a teacher.
Not to be a teacher. But also, I mean, if you want people with kids to be teachers, you should pay teachers more. I mean, like, it's not like the reason. I mean, not that it's a bad thing for people without kids to be teachers, obviously. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but who knows what we have to say these days. But, you know, if that, like, actually was a goal of yours, it's interesting given that, like, having a family on a teacher's salary is more difficult than it should be. It's like nothing that you guys care about aligns with your policy. Like, none of your values align with your policies whatsoever in a way that feels like almost intentional at this point. Like, I'm like, does JD Vance want Donald Trump to lose? Like, is this a psyop?
Will we eventually have to be like, you know what, JD Vance, that was really well done. You really,
it was beautiful.
Yeah, great job. Take a bow. It's funny because it's like, play the tape for JD. Tell me how this is all going to work, because another part of his ideology is this idea that there should be one earner in a family and then the other person should stay home with their kids. So what? Okay, only people with kids should be teachers. There should be only one person working outside of the house in the family. Do you think men should be teachers, or do you think the men should be staying home? Like, tell me how does this all fit together? Like, you went to a big fancy school. You're a big smart, big husky-brained boy. Like, tell me tell me how this works. He also went on Meet the Press, and he had an interview with Kristen Welker that went about as well as his latest visit to a donut shop. He was very strange. He would not walk back his childless cat lady comments, said he was joking, and that it was everybody's fault for not having a good sense of humor. What do you make of that? Do you think he was joking?
He has. Okay, now that I think about it, he has to be trying to, like, tank this campaign, or is he quite literally the least adept person on earth? I mean, it's so strange. It's like he keeps getting, like, these should be layups. Like, going to the donut shop as a candidate should be the single easiest thing that has to happen to you the entire campaign. It's built for this. Like, a million people have done it. Worst candidates, like, you know, like, Biden and Trump on their worst day can go to a donut shop. I just don't understand why he can't, like, meet the moment.
Right.
It's so weird.
He can't answer questions like, what kind of donut would you like? And what makes you happy? Those are questions that JD Vance has struggled to answer. So his answer for what kind of donut was whatever makes sense? Donuts are nonsensical, first of all. Second of all, like, what the fuck, man? Like,
it's so weird.
Very, very
I have a question
weird.
for you.
What?
Who do you think is a worse vice presidential candidate, JD Vance or Sarah Palin?
JD Vance. JD Vance.
I think you're right.
Because Sarah Palin, for a period of time, even though she went rogue and she kind of didn't really know anything, Sarah Palin...
Couldn't name a newspaper.
Yeah, right. That was problematic. But she got under people's skin in a way that made it hard to laugh at her until that, like, balloon was punctured. Like, there's a period of time in 2008 after the Republican convention and before the Katie Couric interview where that lady, people were having nightmares about her. You know what I mean? Like, she got into people's heads. She was like, oh my God, this is a brilliant move. JD Vance is just like a buffoon.
I actually remember in 2008 being at the DNC, and I think it was the last day, and that is when it was announced that she was the nominee. And the whole room was terrified. They're like, he picked a woman, you know, like, he's this woman from Alaska, she's young, she's pretty. Like, she could go to a donut shop and, like, pull it off, right? Like, she couldn't name a newspaper, but she did know how to behave at a donut shop and, like, pick a donut. Like, it just feels like somehow I thought she was going to be the worst one for at least another couple years, and he's come back with a vengeance, this guy.
I just don't understand. Here's the thing. I think that Donald Trump picked him because he was trying to appeal to, like, aggrieved young men of all ethnic backgrounds, of all races. But I think that he suffers from a problem that a lot of like rich white guys who only hang out with dudes suffer from, is that they think the world has a lot more dudes in it than it actually does have. They're not ever in female spaces. They're not ever in queer spaces. And so they have a, like, warped idea of what the world actually looks like and what the country actually looks like. Guys, you're going to run out of dudes. You're going to run out of dudes. Like, you can't just say, oh, I just want women to have more choices when, like, in the past you've been so, like, frothingly anti-choice.
Right.
You can't, like, you're on tape saying over and over again, like, talking over and over again about unborn babies. Like, that is a tell. That is a tell.
Right.
That you do not support abortion, that you don't support abortion rights. You don't support reproductive freedom. Like, I think that he thinks that there's just, like, a lot more dudes.
That's a really interesting point, and it made me think about something that that a friend of mine's theory continues to be that Donald Trump will drop JD Vance at some point. So I wonder, like, that there's no way he goes all the way with JD Vance. I think that that's probably not going to happen. It's late in the game, but that would be that could be the October surprise, that Donald Trump just last minute is like, I don't want you to be my running mate anymore, and pulls on someone else. And apparently he can do that. I looked it up.
He can do it.
I asked ChatGPT.
Yes. Well, he can do it, but he would have to reconvene a Republican convention because he would have to, like, renominate them. And then there are several ballot deadlines that have already passed. Like, Ohio passed early August. Like, so unless I don't know. I don't even want to game this out because I feel like sometimes progressives and people on the left sometimes give them ideas through our anxiety, because we sit there and talk about, like, oh, they could do this and they could do this and they could do this, and they're like, okay, cool. I didn't have to think at all. I just let you be anxious.
I feel like this idea has at least I mean, Trump must be furious with JD Vance. There was that quote where he said, like, they're calling him weird, not me, or whatever. Yeah. And it just, you can imagine, like, this is, you know, it's such a terrible misstep on his part when what he needed was someone who could, like, do the bare minimum of, like, seeming normal and having a conversation
and being young. Here's the thing. I don't think he's going to drop him. I think that strategically, from the perspective of someone who's like, he wants to win the election, he that would make sense. That would be a sensible move. Although it'd be sensible in, like, the crazy way that things that Trump does can never be sensible. But I think that Vance is such a puppet or parrot of, like, the Silicon Valley tech bro billionaires. And to drop Vance would be to cut Trump off from whatever it is they offer him. So I don't know.
I think that's right. Yeah.
It's like, does he love money more or does he love winning more? Which one?
Yeah. Also, I do think that Donald Trump, what's worse to him than having someone nobody likes is having someone that people like more than him. He wants to be the most loved person on a campaign. He wants to be the popular one. And so on some level, like, while, like you said, this should be kind of alarming to him, and if he wanted to win, he might, like, try to figure out a different angle here, try to figure out a different approach. He's probably not as bothered by this as we would be, because in some ways it's ego feeding, right? The fact that everybody's like, what the fuck is up with this guy, means they're not saying that as, you know, they're saying that about JD Vance more than they are about Trump right now, just because we're so used to Trump. And I feel like he likes that.
Yeah. I also do feel bad for JD Vance's wife. I go back and forth.
No, not even remotely.
Okay.
At all.
Go on.
I think I feel worse for JD Vance than I do for his wife.
Yeah. I just feel like, okay, have you ever been dating somebody that you're like, this person is great, and then you take them around your friends and your friends are like, what the fuck? Like, afterwards somebody pulls you aside and is like, he's unattractive, like, he's weird, he's mean, and, like, you're just like, and then you have this moment, you're like, oh my god, I am wrong, I'm, like, bamboozled,
I'm totally wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Right. This has actually never happened to me because I have never dated someone great as a rule. And generally people like my husband more than they like me, so we should maybe be asking him that question. However, I do know what you mean, because I do have those friends who, like, have had a boyfriend where, like, oh, when we're like alone, he's so funny, so, and then you're around them and you're like, what is going on and how do I get out of this situation?
Yeah, and it's, like, embarrassing for the partner of that person. They, like, built them up so much and brought them around, and now it's like, oh, wah-wah, sad trombone. So I feel like maybe JD Vance's wife is experiencing the most intense version of that anybody in recent memory has experienced. Everyone being, like, grossed out by your partner at the same time.
You know, what I would say about that, too, is that they met at Yale. They met at Yale, right? Law?
Yep.
And at these institutions are full of such weirdos that it like really resets the bar of what normal is. Like you get there and like by year 2 you're like, oh, last year this person would have driven me insane, but relative to everybody else they're like pretty okay. So I feel like when you're in that sort of environment you may think someone's better than they are anyway, just because the bar of being normal is so low. And so I wonder if like that's part of it too. Like at Yale Law, I bet JD Vance is like relatively normal.
A catch.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, maybe.
Something like that. Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. I used to, my first year out of college, I was in AmeriCorps, and I was working out of an office at the University of Chicago. And at the University of Chicago, they called that phenomenon University of Chicago's. Like goggles that where you can, everything like changes because everyone there is like so smart and accomplished and like so smart that they are just not normal. And yeah, use Chicago's is what happens when you're there for a while and you're like, okay, no, these weirdos, this is what normal is.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Nancy Pelosi. Is she a gangster or what?
You know, I had like been underestimating Nancy Pelosi for a few years. I had kind of thought she had like lost her skills, and she is fully Stella's groove back right now. She really knows how to get what she wants out of this party. I also think like a lot of people wanted this, right? Wanted Biden. Like he needed a push, but people could see the writing on the wall. Right? It just was a matter of like who could get him over the hump, and it seems like her advocacy at least got them largely there. But I also think she didn't have to start. Certainly wasn't starting from scratch, right? Like everybody saw that debate. Everybody knew this was a problem. Everybody knew this was a risk for the party, right? And that there was a lot of protecting someone's feelings, which, you know,
someone's feelings and a lot of people's jobs too. I think a lot of people in DC get a little bit, it can get to a point where people care more about their job than they care about the best move, like for the entire country. And I could see it being something, if Nancy Pelosi seems like they're coming for your boss, I could see it just being like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, just, I've got a lease. I just moved here, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I think the thing about Pelosi, I was telling my husband this the other day. I think that she will be looked back on as like maybe the greatest legislator of the 20th and into the 21st century. I think that she's just so she's so talented at what she does, for better or for worse. She is such a good politician. I also think, she's 84, and it's easy to forget that because she's still got it, and I remember a couple years back people were really pressuring her to retire. Right. Do you think that they were right?
No. I mean, at this point I don't. I would say like it's the counterfactual is always so hard to know, right? Like we have not done a great job in this party of making room for younger voices. We haven't done a great job of like moving people out. And so, like if things were different, things would be different. It's hard to imagine what that would look like. But I think that like some of her power comes from the fact that a lot of her talent is like under the radar for people, right? Like we don't see a lot of the ways in which she moves, and we don't see a lot of the ways in which she has power. And so I think that kind of allows her to maintain. I think it's to her benefit, right, that people don't understand how powerful she really is. I think, and I think she would probably agree with that, right? Like it allows her to to wield that power in ways that are, kind of the average person is not actually being exposed to. What do you think? Do you think she should have retired?
No, absolutely not. I thought it was like a little bit. I think people were kind of. The memory of Ruth Bader Ginsburg not retiring and then dying when Trump was the president was fresh in people's minds. And they were like, everybody's like, all these old people, we got to get them out because we have to clear the way for our new bench. And I think in many cases they were absolutely right. Like Dianne Feinstein should have retired, like before she died in office. Like California deserved 2 fully functioning senators.
Right.
We're the biggest state in the country.
Right.
Yeah. So there are a lot of cases where people should have retired after people were calling for it, but I don't think that is a blanket thing that you can call for, because there are, there is the rare unicorn 84-year-old Nancy Pelosi who can somehow seamlessly get a president to decide not to run for re-election. And like, I don't know what she did, but whatever she did, it was impressive.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was quite remarkable.